I had thought for all my life that I was stupid, especially in math. And what we're going to talk about today is our self-images and our self-talk. And the fact that our self-images come from what we say to ourselves about ourselves. So for 42 years, I said to myself, I'm really dumb in math. And my brain said, okay, the basis of my message and the basis of my book is simply in one sentence. Your brain believes what you tell it without question, no arguments, which is scary and wonderful.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Stephen Campbell, who will show us how to rewire our brain. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote comes from Orison Swett Marden. It is the ship at the wharf, not the ship at sea, that rots fastest. The still pool, not the running brook, that stagnates. Here's the reality of the situation. You cannot steer or navigate a boat that is at port. It isn't until you get moving that you can actually change direction and do things. But if you're just sitting around, well, you rust away. That's why I am not a fan of retirement, because that just means you're kind of rusting away unless you've retired to something that excites you, keeps you happy, keeps you occupied, thinking, and moving. Today, we're going to chat about mindset. And I think for many people, mindset holds them back. I know in the past, and even now, it still holds me back. And I've started to question a lot more of my programming. That's what it's all about. Let's face it, we've talked about this so many times. And it's not easy to actually go in and see the scripts that are going on. But the funny thing is, everyone else around you can notice them because of the way you speak about yourself. Today, we're going to talk about how do we rewire our brain to achieve our goals, including money. Steve's going to share stories about how he's helped others do that and how we can do that as well. I think a lot of time the stories we tell ourselves aren't necessarily true. And so we've got to adjust our self-talk, reshape our mindsets, and put in new programming that takes us to where we want to go. A lot of this stuff is backed by science. And so more and more, I think science is understanding these things and coming in line with much of what we've talked about. We'll give you strategies that will help you do that. We'll show you how small tweaks can make a big difference. And hopefully, by the end of the episode, you'll have some ideas to rewire your brain. Steve Campbell acquired his master's degree at the age of 55 to pursue his greatest love, teaching. Became a professor, author, educational dean, and professional speaker. He wrote his book, Making Your Mind Magnificent, which we're going to talk about today. And he gives seminars on cognitive psychology around the world, teaching how we can change what we're saying to ourselves about ourselves. The result is massive. Let's meet Steve and learn how. Welcome to Richer Soul, Stephen Campbell. It's great to have you join us today.
This is going to be fun.
It is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
My father was a physician. My mother was a stay-at-home mom. I had 5 siblings: Shirley, Sally, Steve, Susie, Scott, Skia. I was in a basically middle-class house, not poor, but not super wealthy. And I always had everything we needed in terms of food and shelter and all that. So when I was very young, money really wasn't too much of an issue. It got to be an issue when I began going to college and realizing that college is very, very expensive, and I needed a job to get through. And back when I went to college, which is back in 1965, the tuition at San Diego State was $70 per year. A little different than now. But back then, $70 was a lot of money. Gasoline was 32 cents a gallon. So it was very, very different than it was now. But I saw that I couldn't live like I lived when I lived with my family because we just didn't have the money. So I had to budget how much money I got and lived in that expensive place. I lived in a fraternity house a lot. I never joined because I thought that wasn't for me, but it was so inexpensive that I lived in a fraternity house, which included lunch and a room for, I think it was $70 a month. So it really worked for me. Then when I met my wife and we got married, we both had to work, and we had to work for many, many years. She went back to school and got a graduate degree in education and became an elementary school principal. I went back to school when I was 55 and got my graduate degree in computer science and began teaching computers. So both of us had to work all the time because we just wanted to provide for a family, and we did. Luckily, Mary has a very, very nice retirement, and I do too. So we're in our 70s and enjoying life. And it's kind of nice. So we've never really experienced a place where we didn't have the basic money to provide for ourselves. It was always a struggle because we both had to work. But
when did you say you went back to college for computer science?
When I was 55. Yeah, when I went back to college to get my master's, because I worked in corporations for many years in hospitals. And I was a materials manager, the guy that made sure that everything went out of everything. But hospitals, as you probably know, are very, very political, and I'm not much of a political person. And I kept getting let go. And after about the 5th time over a 12-year period, I said, okay, this isn't going to work for me. What's wrong with you? Because I knew I wasn't done. So I asked myself for the first time in my life, Steve, if you could do anything, what would it be? And the answer came out instantly: teaching. I love teaching. So I discovered that this is before the Apple came out in 1975. I love computers. I could take them apart, put it back together, understand the software and all this. And so I had a mind for computers. And so I went back to school. I got a graduate degree in computer science from USF, University of San Francisco, and found myself teaching. Now, here's where we get into some psychology here. I had thought for all my life that I was stupid, especially in math. And what we're going to talk about today is our self-images and our self-talk, and the fact that our self-images come from what we say to ourselves about ourselves. So for 42 years, I said to myself, I'm really dumb in math. And my brain said, okay, the basis of my message and the basis of my book is simply in one sentence: your brain believes what you tell it, without question, no arguments, which is scary and wonderful. It's scary because most of what we say to ourselves is negative crap. That didn't come from me. That came from Shad Helmstedter's book, What You Say When You Talk to Yourself, written back in the 1980s, and has since been validated by decades of research. Most of what we say to ourselves about ourselves is negative, but that can be replaced by positive stuff. Notice I didn't say change, Rocky. I never use the word change when I talk about the brain. Why? Because your brain's job is to keep you safe. Your brain's job is to keep you risk-free. And when you start talking about change, it freaks out. It said, no, let's not change. Let's not change. It didn't work last time. My job is to keep you safe. Change involves risk. So let's not change anything. Even if it's bad for you, it says, no, don't change it. Don't change it. So I fooled the brain. I said, okay, I'm not going to change anything. It's all right. Don't settle down. I'm going to replace the messages I've been saying to myself. So I began teaching, and one day the dean came to my office in this one university and said, one of our math professors just quit. See, so you are our new math professor. I can't do math. He said, you want a job? Learn. There's the book. Next semester, you're teaching math. Well, I needed the job, so I ran down to the local library, picked up all the books on brain-based learning. And I taught my curriculum based on how the brain learns. Then students began saying to me, you're such a wonderful math teacher. And do you know what I began doing, Rocky? I began replacing what I've been saying to myself for 42 years with what those students were saying. You're such a good math teacher. You really make it work. And when I did, what did my brain say? Oh, okay, because your brain believes everything you tell it, whether it's true or not. And I began getting really good at math. And I ended up writing 2 college textbooks on computer software and math. So the point that I make with my students and the people who have read my book, and this relates to everything in terms of what we do and money, is that our self-images, and notice I didn't say self-image, I said self-images. We don't have one self-image. We've got thousands. I have a self-image for how I see myself as a teacher, as a grandfather, as a husband, as a Christian, as everything. So I have a self-image for all those things, okay? Those self-images are learned, as I said a few minutes ago. Now, you were born with certain natural things. I was born a natural teacher. I loved teaching when I was a kid. I used to put rocks in my backyard and pretending I was teaching them, okay? I was dumb. I was a weird kid. But I had to learn how to teach, as Mary learned how to be an organizer when she became a principal. So I began learning how to teach, and I got really, really good at it. Okay? So what's so exciting is that our self-images that we have, you can learn them, or you can teach them, as you can replace what you're saying. So the example is the math. Now, here's another story that illustrates the scary part of this. I was teaching math at USF, and a student came to my office after the first day of class. We taught at a quarter back then. And she sat down in my office. She said, Mr. Campbell, I'm really glad you're my professor because I am a C student in math. That was her self-image, math. I said, what do you mean, Sue? She said, I have never gotten above a C in a math test. I am a C student. I said, well, I used to be that way. So let's work together. So I worked with her and she got an A in the first midterm. I'll never forget this. I gave her the test and she looked at it and she absolutely freaked out. She went, oh. And then she said, oh, Mr. Campbell, this is a mistake. What do you mean, Sue? I have never gotten above a C in a math test. You must have made a mistake. And I said, no, Sue, this is a genuine A. This is an A. So I'll never forget this. She looked at it longer and then her face just lit up. And she said, do you know what this means? And of course, I'm getting really excited. So I sat down with her. I said, of course I do, Sue, but you tell me, what does this mean? This means that when I flunk the next test, I can still maintain my C. I said, Sue, just get an A on every test. She said, oh, I can't. Why? I am a C student. And that's exactly what happened. She flunked the next test. She got a C in the course. So I sat down with her. I said, Sue, answer me this. What would have happened if you had flunked this first test? Do you know what she said, Rocky, without a moment's hesitation? She said, easy. I would have studied like crazy to get A on the next test. I said, Sue, just get A on every test. She said, I can't. Why? Because I'm a C student. I've always been this way. This is the way I was raised. This is what I look like. This is what I weigh. This is what I cannot do. This is where I get stuck. Or, Rocky, you know when your old life ended? Your old life ended 1 second ago, which means what? When did your new life begin? It began 1 second ago. Now do the math, 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour, 24 hours per day. In one 24-hour period, you have 86,400 new opportunities for new life every single day. Now, let's talk about money. Timothy Connor, I think that was his name, got his doctorate from Virginia Commonwealth University, and his thesis was on lottery winners. Here's what he discovered. Lottery winners which were born in poverty and were suddenly millionaires and maybe multimillionaires. What do you think happened to the money, Rocky?
Disappeared inside of 18 to 3 years.
18 to 3 years.
Same thing happens to people who inherit money.
Exactly. Why? Why is that? Because, Rocky, they have a very, very strong self-image of a person who is in poverty. And when you start giving them money, they say, no, that doesn't work for me. I'm not a rich person. I'm a poor person. And you have all this money, and whether it's there or not, they get rid of it. And we all do that. We shoot ourselves in the foot. Just like I thought I was really dumb, and the brain said, yes, you really are. And it wasn't until I discovered that I'm really smart. But then what I had to do is replace those self-images. Now, here it goes to another subject. Steve, what if what you're saying is not true? Here's a wonderful, wonderful discovery. It started with the work of Dr. V.S. Ramachandran out at UC San Diego, who wrote an amazing book called, what's the name of the book? An amazing book called, and it just left, I'll give it to you, it's in my library, but he wrote an amazing book, and Phantom is in the Brain. And it talks about people who have had, a patient goes into a doctor's office. He'll say, you got to help me. I can't do a thing with my arm. And the doctor says, well, that couldn't be because I cut off that arm 6 months ago. And the patient says, you didn't tell my brain that. My brain still thinks it's there. My brain wants to pick things up with it. It's driving me absolutely crazy. It's itchy and achy. And so the brain just believes everything you tell it. He told an amazing story on chapter 12 about a merry knight who walked into the office of a doctor. Oh, no, it'll come. It was Dr. Martin, who had a practice in Manhattan. This was during the Great Depression. Now, we have the medical records, so we know this actually happened. So he was an OBGYN. Dr. Mary Knight walked into his office. She was really pregnant, very excited. And she said, would you please give me an exam? Because my husband has been out of work and I have not been able to get an exam for this. And I think I'm going to deliver really soon. He said, absolutely. So he gave her an exam, and he noticed a couple little things, a couple little hiccups. Number one, her belly button was still an innie, not an outie, and it couldn't find a fetal heartbeat. It turns out she wasn't pregnant. She had a condition called pseudocyesis, which is where you want a baby so badly that the hormones kicked in. So when she missed 3 periods, she had declared to her husband, I'm pregnant. And the hormones kicked in. She got the big belly and the big breasts and the sway back position and the abdominal fat, the whole thing. So she wasn't pregnant. And it turns out that all her friends had kids, and all her brothers and sisters all had children. And so what does Dr. Martin say to her? Well, he lied. I don't think this is very ethical, but he lied. He said, you're right, you're going to deliver today. We don't have time to get you to the hospital. I'll deliver you right here. She got nice and comfortable with warm blankets and warm pillows and nice and relaxed and fell. In fact, she fell asleep. When she woke up, he was right there with her and he said, I'm so sorry, but we lost the baby. And of course, she was crushed, but she eventually left the office. She came back a week. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot this part. As soon as she said that, her tummy began going down. Her tummy, and she felt the baby. She felt the baby, and her tummy began going down. She bounced in his office a week later, just as big as before, and she declared, Doctor, you forgot to deliver my twin. So the brain believes everything you tell it. Now, why is that so wonderful? Because it believes everything you tell it about money and yourself as a person. And it could replace those messages with new messages. Now, let's get into what is called, where the brain locks into whatever you're saying. It'll come back. Sorry. What happens is when we give ourselves
plasticity.
Thank you. Neuroplasticity. It's when you give yourself messages and those messages become significantly constant and they become what's the word for it? Consistent. Okay. Your brain rewires itself. And so those brains become automatic. They become a part of just the way you think. So let me give you another example of how this works. My father died when he was very young. And as Mary and I drove away from the memorial service, this is back in 1976. So this is a long time ago. She said to me, if you die early, I'll kill you. Because I don't want to be a widow for 40 years. So I said, okay, yeah, you're right. So I need to lose this weight. I was about 240 back then. So I said, okay, I'll get up and I'll lose all this weight. So I'd get up and run and swim and all this. And I'd lose maybe 2 or 3 pounds in a week. And then what happened to me on the weekend, Rocky? All back. I did that for years. Here's the reason I could not lose the weight. I looked into the mirror. I give myself a pep talk. And I would say, you are a 240-pound man who's got to lose 40 pounds. But when I said, Rocky, you are a 240-pound man, what did my brain say? Okay. Is it true? Don't care. All I care is what you tell me. Now my job is to keep you at 240 pounds. That's what it did for years. And I didn't know this until I began studying all this other stuff in psychology. I realized, oh my gosh, I can give myself the wrong message. So that's when I brought in what is called an affirmation. Now, I want to be really careful with affirmations because that's where my book leads to. An affirmation, not something magical. It's not new age. It's not weird. It's simply a statement that when you write it correctly, triggers a picture in your mind of a goal that has already been accomplished. So let me give an example of that. When I used to give presentations on this in colleges and places, I would say, let me illustrate how incredibly powerful affirmations are. I would say to my students, we're going to yawn all together and stretch. 1, 2, 3. Exhale. So when you yawn, at the very peak of it, I want you to say, I am so tired. And watch what happens. So 1, 2, 3, the whole class yawned and stretched. And then they all said together, I am so tired. And then I said, close your eyes. And they were all sleepy. There was one gentleman who fell asleep and began snoring because the brain believes everything you tell it. So when I said, and you're 240, you're right. So I said, okay, this isn't working. So I made up an affirmation, which is simply a statement. The affirmation, I'm 200 pounds. I look great because of how I eat and exercise like a 200-pound person. Now, when I first said this, my brain freaked out. It said, excuse me, reality check here. Look at the scale. Look at the mirror. You weigh 200 pounds, you weigh 240. And that's when I said, no, brain, I'm in charge. I call the shots here. I weigh 200 pounds and I look absolutely fantastic. Now, after a few days of this, my brain began to be convinced that I really meant it. But then let's get into what's called Gestalt psychology. Gestalt psychology observes that the brain hates gaps. Okay? So there's this 40-pound gap between what I was saying and what I actually was. So I said to myself, I'm 240, and my brain said, you absolutely are. I believe you, and my job is to keep you there. And that's what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. So I began saying to myself, I'm 200 pounds. And my brain, over a while, began getting convinced of that, but it said, we've got 40 pounds we've got to get rid of. The first thing it wants to do is to give up. That's the easiest way. Just give up, Steve. It'll always be 240. And that's when I said, no, I'm the boss. I'm 200. And whenever I sit down for a meal, I'm going to eat like a 200-pound person. And over time, it's happened over and over. And that's where neuroplasticity came in. My brain became so locked in to being 240. That was my mindset. And I did lose the weight. And I've still lost it. It hasn't come back. That is so exciting, Rocky, because that means that we don't have to be a victim over the things that we want to do. We can lock on to the way we want right now. Now, let's get into goals that are hard, especially in terms of money. Here's what happens with goals, especially with money. I set up a goal. I'm not just going to throw out a figure here. I will make $200,000 this year. Let's just deal with that, or we'll pay off the. Let's just say I will make $200,000 this year. Here's the problem with that. When you say I will make $200,000, the brain says, great, wonderful, hope you do. I'm going to take a nap. Why? Because the brain can't control the future. It doesn't know what's going to happen in the future. And it's so busy dealing with the present that the future is just kind of, okay, good luck, I hope you do. That's why so many of our goals just don't work. I will do this, I will do that. Or sometimes we say in our goals, I should. You know what we do, Rocky? We should ourselves to death. Because when we say, I should, the brain says, yeah, you really should. Of course, you probably won't, but you really should. Another thing that we say in our goals is, I'll really try. Here's the reason that doesn't work. Let's imagine I was in Dean, and students would come to my office and they would say, Mr. Campbell, I don't understand because I got a C on this test and I'm really trying. And so I would put something on the desk in front of them and I'd say, that's wonderful, Tim, try to pick that up. Try to pick it up. And he'd reach over and try to pick it up. And I say, no, don't pick it up. Try to pick it up. What? Try to pick it up. And he didn't know what to do. And I said, the point is, when you say, I'll really try, that's absolutely meaningless. The brain doesn't know what to do that. So what do you say? Not I will, not I should, not I'll try, but I am making $200,000 right now. And of course you're not. But the brain doesn't know that, because the brain believes everything you tell it. So let's say you're making $150,000. We got to figure out how to get that $50,000, that extra $50,000. And it's amazing how it finds ways to do that. I could share with you instances in my own life where it's just amazing how things can happen. Let me give you just one, which is just an illustration of this. We have two daughters, Abby and Sarah. Abby's 45, Sarah is 42. Years ago, Sarah wanted to go to the University of San Francisco for her college education, and that's great, but USF is very expensive. If you're a teacher, you're not teaching for the money. So we got together as a family on a Sunday night, and we created this affirmation, and we said, Sarah is going to USF, and not only that, but we're not going to spend the rest of our life paying off student loans. And that's what we locked onto. We locked onto that on a Sunday night, okay? And the next morning I went to work, taking the same route I had taken for 7 years. This time, when I took that same route, I noticed a sign on the freeway on the way to work where I was teaching. It said University of San Francisco. USF, University of San Francisco, was right in Santa Rosa, which is 7 miles north of us. I didn't know that. Why did I see it this time? Because when we create financial goals for ourselves, and those financial goals are in the present tense, the brain begins looking at ways to find ways to meet those goals. It finds ways. There's USF right there. So to make a very, very long story short, I came in. Now, let's go back just a second. I wrote my first 2 books in software for Q Education Training, which was the largest computer publishing company in the world. I wrote the book. They loved it. They made 30,000 copies. You can still go on Amazon and see it. But when the book was published, Q was purchased by Pearson. There's no such thing as Q anymore. And Pearson never marketed the book. So I think I sold 18 in Australia or something like that. That was it. But, I'm a published author and all this sort of stuff. Okay. So I had this book. In fact, it sits in my library here called Office 97 Complete. So I went for this interview and I took my book with me. And I said, I'd like to work for USF. And they said, you can't because you don't have a master's, you don't have a doctorate. You have to have a master's or a doctorate to work for USF. I said, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that was it. Sarah, now she wanted to go to USF. And we prayed about it. We wrote the affirmation. And then 6 months later, USF called me. And they said, this is USF. Do you remember me? Oh, yes, I do, Maggie. How are you? Good to see you. Steve, a class just came up on software, and you're the first person I thought of. But Maggie, I don't have a master's. I don't have a doctorate. Yes, but you're a published author. But Maggie, the book never sold. We don't care. And your book is on software. So you will be perfect for this. So here's what we're going to do, Steve. We're going to grandfather you in. And if you agree to teach at USF for what we pay, which was incredible, we'll credit you the courses that you teach, and you can use those courses to get your own master's here at USF while you're teaching. And I said, if Sarah goes to USF, can we do the same? And she said, absolutely. So for the next 10 years, I taught at USF at night. It paid for Sarah's education and my master's. I think I went to Excel and figured out how much I made over those years based on what they were paying me and with the tuition I didn't have to pay. It was like $85,000 in a book that never sold.
It's amazing what happens.
It is. It's just absolutely amazing. So what I tell my students and people that I work with is make your goals, especially your financial goals, in the present tense. Not I will, I am. And the brain sees that gap and it says, we got to close the gap. We got to close the gap. And it finds ways to do that. Another example. Can I tell another story?
Sure.
Okay. Our oldest daughter, Abigail, it took her about 10 years to find herself. She graduated from high school and never wanted to go to college. She wanted to go to Hollywood to be an actress. Both of our daughters are red hair, and that scared us to death. But That was what Abby wanted. She's always been a drama queen. And we tried to talk her out of it. She said, no, I want to go to Hollywood actress. So she graduated barely, just barely from high school. And we rented a truck and drove her down to Hollywood. And that was it. And prayed all the way home, and Mary cried all the way home. And there was Abby in Hollywood and scared to death, or we were scared to death. And she was fine. She stayed there for 7 years. And she called us and she said, you know what? I'm working for Spelling Industries, which did 90210, Charlie's Angels, Love Boat, the whole thing. I'm working for the writers of Charmed, which is still on TV. It's about warlocks and witches and stuff like that. These writers they've been educated at Yale, Harvard. What was the second one? Yale, Harvard, and Princeton. And they have doctorates, they have masters in communication, and they're writers. All I can do is get them coffee because I don't have anything. And then if I don't get my college education, that's what I'll be doing. And we said, could be. So she said, would you mind if I stayed down here in LA and went to the JC? Which she did. Then she called and said, would you mind if I went to the JC up there and live with you and Mom? Which she did. And if she was in a room studying and her door was closed, we had to not only walk by very quietly, but be sure not to knock on the door because she'd get really pissed off. What happened was she graduated from UC Berkeley with a 4.0. What did she do? She found a way. Here's another example. One of the really challenging things about UC Berkeley is housing. She found an attorney with a practice back east, but who had owned a Victorian mansion in the Berkeley Hills. And she would choose one student a year to live in her mansion if they took care of her dog free of charge. So that's where Abby lived. We ended up taking the dog on the weekends, so it's just amazing what your brain can do. So what have we learned together? Number one, you're in charge. Your brain believes everything you tell it without question.
It does. And you kind of covered the one thing, which is so often people say something to their brain, but then they're like, they don't believe it.
They don't believe it. Yeah.
It's overcoming that obstacle. I think that's the big part of it is making sure you believe and accepting it as the truth.
That's right.
And at that point, then maybe, or hopefully it sticks.
Yeah.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man Podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man Podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform.
One thing about the brain is people say to me, well, if I just believe it will come true. And I say, no, it doesn't quite work out that way because the brain's not stupid. And it has to be realistic. How can I know that it's realistic? There's a really, really nice test. If you can see yourself doing it, if you can actually see yourself making 200,000, or you can see yourself getting your master's, or you can see yourself, then it's realistic. If you just can't see it, then maybe you need to ratchet it back a little bit. It's got to be realistic so that I mean, you can't fly to the moon because that's just not realistic. And maybe 200,000 is not realistic right now, but maybe 175 is. So look at your heart and look at what you're really saying. Now, that gets into the feelings part. Can we spend a little time about feelings?
Sure.
Okay. This is again from Dr. Albert Ellis, A Guide to Rational Living. And he started this whole thing back in 1961. Here's what he determined, and this has since been validated. The big controversial question before he wrote his book, A Guide to Rational Living, was, do our feelings come first or our beliefs come first? Which comes first? Before 1961, the psychologist said, no, your feelings come first and then your beliefs. Like when 9/11 happened, it didn't matter what you were believing. As you saw the towers fall, your feelings were there. So they said, no, your feelings always come first. After decades of study and his book, we've discovered that it's switched. Our beliefs come first and then our feelings. So let's go back to me as an example. I believed I was dumb in math. When I was younger, I believed I was dumb in everything. Okay? That made me feel very bad about myself. Because when you're believing that you're dumb, you don't feel all that great about yourself. I believed I was raised this way. I believed I looked this way. I believed that I was never going to be good looking because I was bald. So I believed all of these things about myself, and those caused feelings. Here's what he discovered. Our feelings do not come from how we were raised or what we look like or events in our lives. Do you know where they come from, Rocky?
Where?
They come from our beliefs about how we were raised and our beliefs about events in our lives and our beliefs about what we look like. Now, people say to me, well, I'm not really sure what my beliefs are. There's a wonderful handle on that. And the handle is listen to yourself talk. If you want to know what you believe about yourself, listen to what you say about yourself.
I was just at a weigh-in event this weekend, and it's designed, it's kind of a mindset type of an event.
Yes.
And I got called out for that very thing multiple times. They're like, did you hear what you just said about yourself? They're like, you better watch your language.
Yeah.
And it's very true. And I started to realize that. I'm like, whoa.
Be careful with what you say. I'll give you a couple of applications in a second. Let me give you another story that's just amazing. My wife was an elementary school principal. And one time we were talking at night after one of her days. And she said, I got to tell you what happened this morning. She said, I woke up this morning and I was already here in my office studying. So I'd get up early. And I woke up and I realized that I was going to have a horrible day. I said to myself, I'm going to have a rotten day. I'm going to deal with this parent who is just horrible. And I said to myself, I'm going to have the most horrible day. And she's been coming to my seminars for years. She read my book. And she listened to herself. And she jumped out of bed in her nightgown. And she took her principal stance, which she can do, I can't. And she looked at her brain. She talked to her brain rather than a kid. She said, listen, brain, I'm going to have a great day. And she said, Steve, I saw my brain kind of floating ethereally in front of me. The eyes got really big. And the brain said, oh, okay, absolutely, because you're the boss. I believe everything you tell me. And okay, I know, make it a great day. Well, first of all, the parent never showed up, which is great. And she said, I had one of the nicest days I've had for a long time. And she said to me when we were talking in the living room, she said, the message is so powerful because it really affects how you see yourself all day long. So let me share with you a couple of applications. Can we do that?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Let's go to, because if you can't apply this is not going to do you any good. Gosh, time has gone by so fast. That one applies when you do something really well, and one applies when you blow it. That pretty much covers everything that we do. Okay, so let's do this something when you do something really well. When we do something really well, like we give a really good presentation, like we write a really big book or whatever, okay? And people say, good job, good job. What we do is we say, oh, no, not really. Oh, that's embarrassing. I'll study harder next time. This is from Stanford University back in 1975 called the effort effect. You can look it up on Google if you want to. What we've discovered is that most of us pass over our successes too quickly, too lightly for them to ever become a part of who we are. We pass them over. Our successes, not the stuff that we do wrong, we pass over our successes. So when you say, good job, we say, oh, no, not really. Well, the problem with that is those compliments fall to the floor. They never become a part of us. So here's what I tell my audiences. Okay, from now on, when you do something well and someone compliments you, you say to them, you know what? You're absolutely right. I'm really good. Now, I was down at Long Beach a number of years ago giving an all-day seminar to a group of Kaiser physicians, about 300 of them. And when I said, you're absolutely right, the whole ballroom just broke up and howled. But they loved me. They loved me. They bought my book, my audio, the whole thing. And when I was driving back to the airport, I was so excited I almost drove out the freeway. So I stopped by Chevron, got a tuna sandwich, Coke, and I looked up in the passenger mirror of the car, and I was alone. Nobody saw me do this. And I said to myself, I said, oh, you are the most amazing speaker. And do you know what my brain said? You really are. But then it also said, it doesn't stop there. It said, and Steve, you could even be better. I got all these ideas about being a better speaker. I'll put this slide there and that slide there and that sort of stuff. Now, what we then need to do is when someone compliments us, we simply say, and this is the realistic, you know what? That makes me feel really good about myself. Thank you for taking the time to tell me that. And then when we get by ourselves, Rocky, we wallow in our success like a pig in slop. We wallow in our success like a pig in slop. Let me ask you a question. Why do we have to wait for other people to tell us how amazing we are? I've been studying the brain for probably 30 years, and the more I study it, the more amazed at what I am. So we are an amazing people. Now, let's take the last 5 minutes for when we blow it. What do you do when you blow it? Okay. Why do we blow it? We say, oh my goodness, how could I have been so stupid? Unfortunately, the brain pops up and says, oh, I know. Remember that dumb thing you did yesterday? That dumb thing you did a week ago, a month ago, a year ago? Remember how you were the slowest reader in the 3rd grade? And we get out this list and we start going down the list of all the dumb things we've ever done. Is my picture up there? I can't see my picture.
It's fine. Keep going.
Okay. We get out this list and we start going down the list of all the dumb things we've ever done. Now, this is what's really important to understand. When you do that, your brain doesn't know that those memories, and that's all they are, they're memories, happened a week ago, a month ago, a year ago. The brain's recording them again, but this time it's never happened. When? Right now. And then you're carrying that crap around. So here's what we do when you blow it. Number 1, throw away the list. You don't need the list. Get rid of it. Number 2, use 3 wonderful words. You know what the words are? The next time. The next time I'll do it this way. The next time I'll do it this way. And when you say the next time, you're saying 3 things. Number 1, you're saying there is a next time. How many next times do we get, Rocky?
Unlimited.
Unlimited. Millions and trillions. Number 2, when you say the next time, you're saying
there's a next time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You say that I'll never give up. I'll never give up. But number 3, and this is the best, when you say the next time, you're saying, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still changing, which means I'm still making mistakes. But just because I fail doesn't mean I'm a failure. Thomas Edison was asked how it felt to fail 999 times looking for the filament of a light bulb. He said, I did not fail 999 times. I simply found 999 ways it didn't work. That's what we're doing in our life. When COVID came along, the world got together and figured out how to deal with it. And they had to make a lot of mistakes to get there. But you can see where we are today. Wow. Let me give you one last story that sort of summarizes everything I've said. I was on my work one morning to teach, and I was waiting for the light to change. This kid came up to me in a very, very fancy car. I looked at my little Toyota, and I looked at him, and the light changed. He went peeling out in front of me, roaring up the freeway, passing everyone. And as I watched him, I had this epiphany. How many cars are already in front of him? Millions. How many cars are behind him? Millions. So it's not a matter of how fast you get there. And this is also money too. It's a matter of you're going in the right direction. But even when you go in the right direction and you're making money, sometimes you get a flat tire. Or sometimes you're on a gas. Or sometimes we even lose our way. But you know what? We can replace the tire. We can get a map. But we can lock on to what we really want. And the whole time the brain just saying, okay, I believe you. Is it true? I don't even care. All I care is what you tell me.
The good thing is with GPS, it doesn't even wait. It says redirecting.
That's right. Bingo. That's right. So there's two slides that I use on my presentation that I share with everyone. Simply this, it's a primary element that holds us back from the money and from everything else and from learning, growing, is what we say to ourselves. The primary element that holds us back is what we say to ourselves. And if you sense, and after hearing this, you can, that what you're saying is maybe just not true, or you decide, I'm just not going to say it anymore. I'm going to replace it. Like you learned today, the brain just says, oh, okay. But the more you do it, the easier it is to do because your brain's rewiring itself. Wow, that's exciting stuff.
So I'm going to ask you for one more story.
Okay.
I'm looking for the story of someone named
Cliff Young.
Cliff Young. That's right.
Cliff Young, back in 1965, entered the first Australian marathon. And he was 65 years old. And he entered along with 150 of the top marathon runners in the world. And the race was from Sydney to Melbourne, 885 kilometers, 545 miles. And Cliff Young showed up with no teeth. He had no teeth at all, in galoshes and muck boots with all these other professional runners. And of course, all the reporter ganged up on Cliff. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And he said, well, I've spent my life on the outback chasing 2,000 head of sheep on a 2,000-acre ranch. I mean, I run sheep for 3 days. This is a 5-day race. I've run sheep for 3 days. So I thought this would be fun. That's the word he used. This thought this would be fun. So he entered the race, and of course, with this kind of story, guess what? He won. I mean, he beat them all. But listen to this, Rocky. He beat them all by a day and a half.
Incredible
How did he
margin.
do that? Incredibly do that. You know how he did it? When you run a race like this, when the professionals run a race, they run for 18 hours and they sleep for 6. Cliff didn't know that. He didn't know you're supposed to sleep. So while all of the other races were sleeping, he just kept on running. Now, that's really inspirational. I am not sharing these messages to inspire you, Rocky, because inspiration lasts for maybe 3 days. And then we go back to our old ways. I'm here to help you change the way you think. So let's talk about the next year. The next year had the same race. Cliff Young showed up, couldn't finish it because he did himself. 8 runners beat his record. And the year after that, they asked runners, how did you do it? How did you train it? And they said, we looked at Cliff Young. If Cliff Young can do it, I can do it. And here's what's exciting. Number one, your brain believes you. And we haven't talked about this. But number two, your brain's job is to find a way. It finds a way when you lock onto it. When I was a little boy, my dad taught me how to ride a bicycle. Took me out to this road, took the train wheels off. He said, now, before I give you a shove, you see that rock in the road about 50 feet? Yes, Daddy. Don't run into that rock. And you already know what happened. I got down on the bike. I locked onto the rock so I would not run into it. Of course, what happened? Bam. That's how the brain works. You lock on to what you want to do with your money. You lock on to how much money you want to make. And then you put it in the present tense. And then your brain's job is to find a way to do it. And it will, in such amazing ways. I did this presentation for many years to real estate developers. And one person told me a story who was a real estate developer. She said, you know what I did, Steve? I made it the model of the house that I wanted, right down to the shrubs. And I was showing houses, and there was the house. And I bought it, and that's where I'm living now. Amazing. So the key to this whole thing is just believing that what you are saying is the bottom line.
So a couple things with that. It's my understanding the brain does not understand the word don't. Like it doesn't
understand it. So when I say I will not have that piece of apple pie with whipped cream and ice cream dripping over the sides, the brain doesn't know what to do with that because you're giving it two messages in the same sentence. I will not. And the brain doesn't know what to do with that. So usually you will when you go to a Mexican restaurant and the hostess says, don't touch that plate. It's really hot. What do you got to do, Rocky? You got to touch the plate. There was a really famous hotel in Galveston, Texas that they were building. And just before they opened it up, the manager got together with his people and he said, you know what? People are going to be fishing off the second and third floors. And their weight's going to go down and break all the windows. So what do we do? And one guy said, put a sign on all the windows, put a sign on all the glass doors on the second and third floors. Absolutely no fishing from the balcony. So that's what they did. And what do you think happened the first few weeks?
Everybody's fishing.
And everyone fishing, glass breaking, crazy. And so what did they do? One guy said, take down those stupid signs. And they did. They haven't had a breakage yet. It's just amazing. So here's how your affirmations for your money comes in. You lock on to what you want, not what you don't want. When you say, I want to make more money, the brain's got to know how much exactly. Tell me so I can lock onto it like the rock in the road. And I'll find what to do with it. So we don't put the word not in there. We say, this is the amount of money that I want to make. And the brain says, okay, and then looks for it, finds ways to do it. Amazing. Amazing. Mary and I knew how much we needed to retire. And Mary went back to school when she was in her 40s, and I went back to school when I was in my 50s. And lo and behold, we have our house paid off, and we have enough money that we're really, really comfortable. But it took a number of years for us to lock onto how much money do we need for retirement? But we're there, and it's really, really, really nice. By the end, the brain found a way. Yeah.
And just one, I'll share a story too, which is Roger Bannister.
I love stories.
Everyone said you can't run faster than a 4-minute mile. Roger Bannister does it back in 1954. Yeah. And within weeks, people were running 4-minute miles. I mean, it wasn't widespread, but the point is, once it's possible, then anyone can do it. And it's pretty amazing.
If you're in high school track, if you're really good, you run the 4-minute mile. High school track. That's one of my favorite stories, by the way. Yeah. The whole world said, no. And he did it, and suddenly everyone can.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Personally, my secret to living an abundant life is, first of all, Jesus Christ coming into my life. But beyond that, it's knowing that what I say to myself makes such a difference, and to really watch the negative things I say to myself and simply switch them. That's changed my life almost more than anything else. That the way I see myself is based not on how I was raised or not on what I look like. It's what I say about how I was raised. It's what I say about how I look like. And I can change that anytime I want to. I don't have to be a victim of life.
You know, it's funny. I think somewhere in the Bible, it says the comment that I say to people, pray for what you want, and everyone prays for what they have.
That's right. That's right. And there's a wonderful verse in Proverbs that says, as a man thinks, so he is. That's cognitive psychology right there.
There it is.
So it started way back when. Yeah.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
I learned later in life that who I am is based on what I am saying to myself right now. Not how I was raised, not all that stuff. It's what I am saying to myself right now. So I'm sitting here in my little office talking to you. Where are you located, Rocky?
I'm in Pennsylvania.
It's amazing that I'm talking to you and connecting with you in Pennsylvania. Who would have known? So the most wonderful thing is I can simply be careful with what I say to myself and replace it with positive stuff. I'm in control more than I thought I was.
And you are. And so is everyone else listening. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
To be aware of what you are saying to yourself about yourself, and be aware that you can replace the negative with positive. It's your choice. That's why they call this cognitive psychology. You make the choices all day long. No one else does. You do. And added to that, one more thing. What others say to you do not become a part of you until you agree with them. What others say to you do not become a part of you until you agree with them. That's wonderful to know too.
And thank you for sharing. If people would like to learn more and get your book, Making Your Mind Magnificent, Flourishing at Any Age, what's the best way for them to do that?
Amazon, which is the book. It has both a Kindle section and a regular section. And also it's on Audible, where I narrate the book. And it's both available on Audible and on Amazon. And if you want to write to me, you can certainly do that. My email is stevenc, STEVENC @sbcglobal.net, and I'll be glad to respond.
Thank you so much for sharing and for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I love that Steve Campbell is still going so strong at his age, just continuing to go out and do what he loves and have fun. And he does it because he enjoys it. That's the way I want to be when I am his age. And I've already kind of moved my life in that direction. And I'm making little tweaks to make it a little bit better. So let me ask you a few questions. What's the story you tell yourself about who you are? What are your I am statements? People have called me out on the show for my I am statements, and people have called me out in other places for my I am statements. And when you pay attention to that, it's really amazing what goes on. So the question is, the next time you have that, can you redefine it? Can you change it? And how are you going to make those differences? I will admit, for me, I got a ton of them. And I'm going to continue to work on catching them, changing them, and improving them. So here's a question for you. How many people do you know that have those I am statements? Would they benefit from listening to this episode? Do me a favor. Share it with them. I appreciate that. Thank you. You want to share on social media too? That would be awesome. Next week, we're going to have on Richard Vague to talk about debt. And we're going to talk about it from a national level in a very different way. And his theory is that debt actually causes the economy to grow and grow massively, and we can't grow without debt. Interesting conversation. We talk about the economics of the current time as well. Check it out. Have a wonderful and abundant week, and thank you for listening.